very warm welcome to all of you at ICRA IAS. It must be known to all of you, I think as of now, that ICRA IAS Institute has already announced its pre-commenced foundation batch for IAS exam 2021. The admission for this batch has already been started. Students are getting themselves registered with this batch, very fast. Those who are still awaiting, it's my humble request to all of them, please come and join this batch because it is going to be very hilarious and fruitful for you aspirants. Here we have the most acclaimed team of educators, and the inaugural class for the new batch will be commenced on 2nd of October on the eve of Gandhi Jayanti, that is the birth anniversary of great Mahatma Gandhi. Yes, from 9th of October the regular classes will be started. Okay, here in this particular batch we will be covering the entire syllabi corresponding to IAS preliminary as well as mains examination. I myself will be here to discuss Indian polity and constitution with you. My name is Sanjay Thakur. I am the faculty member ICRA IAS for Indian polity and constitution along with PSIR optional. So concerning my own subject, I would like to let you know about the sources of reference as well as what would be my strategy to discuss with you the subject like Indian polity and constitution for the sake of general studies, pre as well as mains both. Okay, see, Indian polity and constitution, it must be obligatory for all of you that this particular subject, it has a great contribution in general studies. When it comes to preliminary examination, you will always have near about 10 to 15 questions from this segment. Okay, so for preliminary examination there will be a total of 12 to 15 questions from this segment, means the segment of Indian polity and constitution. And when it comes to written examination, that is mains examination, the segment of Indian polity and constitution constitutes general studies paper 2, right? General studies paper 2. Out of the different ingredients of GS paper 2, I think polity and constitution is the most weightage carrying segment. See, here in GS paper 2 you will find Indian polity and constitution, governance, right, international relationship, and of course social justice, right. So these are the four major ingredients which constitute general studies paper 2, and you might be knowing that each and every GS paper of mains examination they are having the weightage of 250 marks. Okay, so out of 250 marks general studies paper 2, Indian polity and constitution is directly related to near about 100 marks questions, right? 100 marks questions. Rest 150 marks questions, they are being constituted with these three different components, namely governance, international relationship, and social justice. I myself will be solely concerned with these 100 marks questions related to Indian polity and constitution corresponding to general studies paper 2, right? So in mains examination you may cater or you may develop your catchment upon 100 marks questions with me, and in preliminary examination you will find 12 to 15 questions directly from Indian polity and constitution. In due course of my very first lecture on Indian polity and constitution, I would of course let you know about what would be the strategy to have the coverage of entire syllabi of Indian polity and constitution, but right now my concern is simply to make you acclimatized with the weightage wise contribution of this particular component of general studies in pre as well as mains. Apart from this, when it comes to the source of reference, because the students are very much apprehensive of the fact that what would be the good sources of reference in order to ace their preparation for preliminary as well as mains examination related to Indian polity and constitution. See here the first source of reference I would like to recommend you is two textbooks of NCERTs, 11th standard NCERT and its name is Indian Constitution at Work, right? Indian Constitution at Work. This is basically the new edition of 11th standard NCERT. Okay. Apart from this, I will suggest you one more NCERT textbook, and that is of 12th standard, but remember it is basically the older version, and the name of this NCERT is Democracy in India. Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges, right? Issues and Challenges. Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges. You need to have these two NCERTs with you, and see these two NCERTs, they are sufficient enough to provide you a glimpse of entire components of general studies paper 2. Even you will have the reference of governance related aspects, international relation related aspects if you refer Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges. Okay. When it comes to Indian polity and constitution, up to a certain extent you may have the overlapping of topics in 11th standard as well as 12th standard, these two NCERTs. For example, when it comes to the topic of rights in Indian constitution, rights in Indian constitution, it is given in both the NCERTs, Indian Constitution at Work as well as Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges. When it comes to the provisions related to election and representation, it is given in both the textbooks. But when you go on to refer the issues related to India's bilateral relationship with other neighboring states, or overseas states, it is not given in 11th standard NCERT. Okay, for that you need to refer Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges. Okay, when it comes to the aspects related to governance and administration in India, 11th standard NCERT is not going to help you, but yes, this Democracy in India, Issues and Challenges, it must be helping you. Anyway, so these are the basic source of reference, and corresponding to these two NCERT textbook, I have designed my lecture plan for Indian polity and constitution in such a way that once you go through, or once you have my lectures on Indian polity and constitution, I think from 1st to 7th or 8th lecture, means in first 8th lectures you may have a proper coverage of these two NCERTs. And the name given to that dimension is Introduction to Indian Polity and Constitution. Under the very first dimension of Indian Constitution, you will have the coverage of these two NCERTs well. So there is no need to be worried. Anyway, apart from this, I am suggesting you two more textbooks. One is Our Parliament, right? Our Parliament. Another one is Our Constitution. These are very handy books, and the author of these two books is the same individual, Mr. Subhas Kashyap. Okay, Subhas Kashyap. These two big books are very authentic ones. They are being published by NBT publication, National Book Trust. So you can refer these two textbooks, and if you wish to refer one more, you can refer M. Laxmikant, but it is more a guidebook and less a reference book, right? So for the sake of prelims, no doubt, it's a very good book. M. Laxmikant is a very good book, but whenever it comes to conceptual aspects or to face or develop conceptual clarity, on many occasions this book becomes helpless. So in that condition, these two books will help you for sure, that is Our Parliament by Subhash Kashyap and Our Constitution again by Subhash Kashyap. Okay. So this much sources of reference, I think they are more than sufficient to develop a level of ease and comfort corresponding to Indian polity and constitution for preliminary as well as mains, both the examination. Okay then, so see you soon in regular classes. Thank you so much. Of the country. Because of the legislative supremacy under unwritten constitution, we can't make a distinction between the ordinary legislation as well as the constitutional legislation or constitutional provisions. Means here there exists no difference between the constitutional law as well as the ordinary laws. I mean to say, whatever the legislations or enactments made by the legislative authority of the country, they automatically becomes the indispensable part of constitution, integral part of the constitution. But that is not the case with a country having written constitution. For example, say in India, we are having written constitution. Suppose the parliament has made an enactment. Don't you think each and every enactment made by the Parliament of India cannot be made the integral part of Indian constitution? Only those enactments can be made the integral part of Indian constitution which are the part of constitutional amendment acts. But that is not the case with unwritten constitution. Here, each and every legislations, each and every decisions taken by the legislative authority, or more precisely you can say the parliament, they automatically become the integral part of the unwritten constitution. For example, in the UK, that is England, if the parliament of the UK makes a law, that law shall be treated as one of the constitutional provisions of the UK's unwritten constitution. Means there is no difference. We observe no difference between the parliamentary law as well as the constitutional law. But that is not the case with a country having written constitution. Here we observe a clear-cut distinction, a clear-cut differentiation, a clear-cut demarcation between the ordinary laws as well as the constitutional laws. A clear-cut differentiation between an ordinary law and a constitutional law, right? Here exists no difference between constitutional law and ordinary law. Is it okay to all of you? Yes. One more thing. Yes. Provisions. On the line of the provisions of these two constitutions, namely the written constitutions as well as unwritten constitution, we might observe some difference. See how. See. On the line of constitutional provisions. Constitutional provisions. See, this way I have written the term constitutional in brief. Constitutional provisions. See, the text of a document like constitution, they are written in the form of different provisions. Those provisions are usually referred to as articles or sections, you know, out of the different articles, you know, the like-minded articles are categorized into different parts, you know. This is how we simply observe that what are the different articles in part 1 of Indian Constitution, what are the different articles in part 2 of Indian Constitution, right. For example, suppose articles 1 to 4, they constitute part 1 of Indian Constitution. Okay. As I told you that the like-minded articles are categorized into different parts. For example, don't you think the provisions of Indian Constitution mentioned via article 1 to 4, they all are related to what? The issues related to union and its territories. Union and its territories. Again, articles 5 to 11, they are there to constitute the citizenship provisions. So, don't you think articles 5 to 11, they are basically the like-minded articles. So, they have been clubbed into the form of a distinct part or particular part, that is part 2, and similar things are observed throughout the Constitution. Anyway, when it comes to the provisions of Constitution, the provisions can be trifurcated into, you know, rigid ones, flexible ones, and a blend of the two, that is rigid plus flexible, you can say R plus F. So, these are the three different possibilities of making the provisions of a constitution. Fine. See, if it comes to a written constitution has all these three possibilities, you know, means all these three possibilities are open to a written constitution. Now, again I am saying it solely depends upon the discretion of the Constituent Assembly, which was there to formulate this written constitution. So, according to the decision taken by this Constituent Assembly, you know, one can observe whether the written constitution is completely rigid one or is completely flexible on, or is having a blend of rigid provisions as well as flexible provisions, both. Okay. But this is not as such when it comes to the provisions of unwritten constitution, right? Unwritten constitution. Why? An unwritten constitution has always the option of having flexible provisions only. Means an unwritten constitution is totally flexible. Totally flexible. Not even a single rigid provision is there in an unwritten constitution. Unwritten constitution means under unwritten constitution you will observe no rigid provision. All the provisions are flexible. Okay. Do you know what is difference between flexible provision and rigid provision? See, flexible provision of a constitution is one which can be easily amended, which can be easily altered, which can be easily changed. Okay. But if a particular provision of a constitution invites the greater degree of complexity when it comes to carry out some sort of amendment over it, then that particular provision is referred to as the rigid provision. Means a rigid provision can also be amended well, no problem, because constitution can never be static. Constitutions are always dynamic, and how to ensure the dynamic behavior of constitution? By observing amendments over the provisions of the constitution. So, all the provisions, no matter whether it's being the rigid provision or it's being the flexible provision, they all are subject to amendment. They all can be amended. But when it comes to make differentiation between a flexible provision and a rigid provision, we can make differentiation in a manner like a rigid provision is one, the process of its amendment is very difficult, that's it. Means the mode of amendment of a particular provision, if invites greater degree of complexity, means the procedure to amend the constitutional provision is if difficult one, then you can say the said provision is rigid one, rigid provision. On the other hand, if a particular provision can be easily amended, or you can say the procedure to carry out an amendment over a particular provision is very, simple, then you say yes, it's a flexible provision. Okay, flexible provision means rigidity or flexibility of a constitution, it simply lies in the way of amendment. If the way of amendment is difficult, that particular provision of the constitution is termed as rigid provision. If the way of amendment is easy, then you say the said provision is flexible provision, right? So, wherever you find a written type of constitution, that constitution may be comprised of all its rigid provisions. It may also be comprised of all its provisions being the flexible ones. It may also be comprised of the provisions being the unique blend of rigid ones as well as the flexible ones. But in case of an unwritten constitution, always remember here its provisions are flexible only. Means all the provisions of an unwritten constitution are flexible ones. This is the reason why an unwritten constitution is always termed as something like more dynamic as comparison to the written constitution. More dynamic means without any difficulty, by observing a tune with the changed circumstances, the mode of governance and administration can easily be changed. Why? Because the unwritten constitution always provides, a smooth scope to the legislative authority of the government to go on to have changes over the constitutional provisions. Here the legislative authority can easily carry out amendment over one or more provision or provisions of unwritten constitution with the help of simple majority only, with the help of following simple legislative business. But that is not the case with rigid provisions. They can also be amended, no problem, but the procedure to carry out amendment over them, they are difficult ones. This is how you can define what is flexible provisions of constitution, what is meant by rigid provisions of the constitution. Is it okay to all of you? Yes. The Constitution of the USA, remember it is a written constitution, and all the provisions of this constitution are rigid ones. So you can say US constitution is that type of written constitution which is totally rigid, USA's constitution is totally rigid. One more written constitution, see, the Constitution of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, there is found a written constitution, right? But this written constitution is totally flexible. Means all the provisions of Sri Lankan constitution are flexible. Means they can be easily amended. One more example of a written constitution is Indian constitution. Indian Constitution. Our constitution is also the written constitution, but when it comes to define the nature of constitutional provisions, don't you think Indian constitution is comprised of rigid plus flexible, both the kinds of provisions? Okay, so this is what I have tried to make you understand about the different provisions of constitution. Means a written constitution has always the scope of all these three different types of constitutional provisions, but this scope is in very limited form when it comes to an unwritten constitution, because the provisions of unwritten constitutions are always flexible. And see, globally, I mean on worldwide level, there are only 4 constitutions which are basically the unwritten constitutions. For example, the constitution of the UK, yani British constitution is a role model type of unwritten constitution, you can remember. Second one is the constitution of New Zealand. Third one is the constitution of Israel. Fourth one is the constitution of Saudi Arabia. Means only there are 4 constitutions which are the unwritten ones. Except these 4, all the democratic constitutions which you find worldwide, they are basically the written constitutions. Okay, and lastly, the most remarkable point of differentiation between the written and unwritten constitution is, remember, a written constitution is always an enacted constitution. A written constitution is always an enacted constitution. What is meant by enacted one? See, the constitution being enacted means it is brought into legal existence on certain specific date. So written constitutions are always brought into their legal existence on certain specific date. For example, the Constitution of India. Have you anywhere seen this date? The date of November 26, 1949. If you turn over the different pages of Indian Constitution, in very beginning, even when you refer the preamble, means the last paragraph of or last stanza of preamble to the Constitution of India, it is explicitly mentioned about this date, November 26, 1949. Means this is the date on which the Constitution of India was brought into its legal existence. And the date on which a constitution is brought into legal existence is termed as the date of enactment of that constitution, because it's the written one. Written one means it's basically the result of something like a well-to-do planning of some institutional arrangement like the Constituent Assembly. And see, with the planning, if you start doing something, it is obvious that according to your plan, there must be certain point of time on which your work would be accomplished. Basically, this principle works with written constitution. Means if once you start the documentation of a written constitution, the institution which is solely responsible to draft the constitution or prepare the constitution, at a certain point of time it must declare that yes, the task or the job which we have started 1 year ago or 2 years ago, now it has been declared to be completed or accomplished. The date of declaration of that accomplishment or completion is nothing but the date of enactment. Means the given date, that is 26th of November 1949, it clearly makes us know that on this particular date only the Constitution of India was, or you can say the responsibility to formulate the Constitution of India was over. Means we have completed the task to write the Indian Constitution. This is the reason why it is called as the date of enactment, date of completion of Indian Constitution. January 26, 1950 is not the date of enactment, that is basically the date of implementation of Indian Constitution. The Constitution was implemented, but here this one is the date of enactment. Means the Constitution was prepared. The Constitution was prepared at this date, November 26, 1949. The Constitution was prepared means the Constitution was brought into legal existence. So, written Constitution being the enacted Constitution means it is always brought into legal existence on certain specific date. What this specific date signifies to us? This specific date, that is the date of November 26, 1949, signifies to us that the Constitution of India was brought into its legal existence on this date only. But in case of an unwritten constitution, you will find no such dates. Means unwritten constitution are never enacted ones. No, rather unwritten constitutions are basically the evolved ones. Means they always undergo through the phases of development. They cannot be completed at any point of time. Means the job of their documentation cannot be completed at any point of time. Here we observe no specific date on which you can say that yes, the job of documentation of an unwritten constitution has been completed. No, it always undergoes through the phases of evolution. So, this is what the difference between written constitution and unwritten constitution. You can also say this is the difference between the enacted constitution as well as the evolved constitutions. Is it okay to all of you? Yes. And this is how you can say a constitution based on the pattern of its documentation can be classified, and it can be classified into two different classes, written and unwritten. Is it okay to all of you? Yes. Now we are going to have a discussion over the classification of constitution based on the values inherent in it, the principles inherent in it. See, classification of constitutions based on the values inherent in it. See, they are basically the democratic constitutions as well as undemocratic constitutions. Undemocratic constitutions. See, if a constitution talks about some sort of specific values or principles, then it is called democratic constitution. If a constitution makes no mention of some specific values or principles, see, till now it is not disclosed to you that of which values or principles I am talking about. Just have a look upon the pattern I am showing you. Constitution, if it talks about or makes the mention of some specific values or principles, then you say it's a democratic constitution. If a constitution makes no mention of such values or principles, right, then it will be termed as undemocratic constitution. Undemocratic constitution. Now the question is about which values or principles, we have to, or we are making a guess here. See, these values or principles are nothing but simply the constitutionalism. The constitutionalism means those values or principles which reflect the degree of constitutionalism. So don't you think there can be one more way to show the pattern of how to make distinction between democratic and undemocratic constitution? For example, if a constitution contains constitutionalism, right? If a constitution contains constitutionalism, then that constitution can be referred to as the democratic constitution. Again, if a constitution lacks the constitutionalism, means there exists no constitutionalism in a constitution, don't you think this constitution can be corroborated as the undemocratic constitution? Are you getting my point or not? Now the question is, what is meant by the values or principles of constitution? What is meant by constitutionalism? Constitutionalism talks about what kind of values or principles? Once it is known to us, we can easily define constitutionalism, and once we define the constitutionalism, we can easily categorize the constitutions, in the form of it being the democratic one or undemocratic one. Okay, see. When it comes to the values of constitution or the principles of constitution, we simply try to search some principles out of a constitution. For example, those principles are, if a constitution properly makes the provision for the concept of rule of law. Rule of law. Rule of law means after having a reference to a particular constitution, suppose you are studying the constitution of a particular country, and during the study of that constitution you find that this constitution provides proper scope for the existence of rule of law in political system of this country. It means it contains the values. This constitution talks about on the line of some principles. Rule of law is a kind of principle. It shows the values of the constitution. What is the meaning of rule of law? Rule of law means no man is above the law. In the eyes of law, we all are equal, irrespective of our rank and file. Is it okay? कानून से बड़ा कोई नहीं. Everyone is equal in the eyes of law. This is basically a thought or principle propounded by A.V. Dicey. Anyway, so it can be referred to as one of the principles or values of a constitution. One more thing, if a particular constitution talks about the concept of freedom of speech and expression, freedom of speech and expression, it means the constitution is talking about upholding the democracy. Remember, freedom of speech and expression is basically the background of the existence of democracy in a country. If somebody says that yes, there is a democracy in the country, but remember, people are not provided with freedom of speech and expression. Now these two statements are contradictory to each other. Without having freedom of speech and expression, you can't even imagine for the existence of democracy in a country. So it's the freedom of speech and expression only, the provisions related to it only you can imagine for democracy to exist, right? So if the constitution of the said country to which you are referring, if it talks about the freedom of speech and expression via means of its different provisions, you can say yes, the constitution talks about one more values, one more principles, right? One more thing, I am going to omit something, right? See, if the said constitution talks about, the provisions related to how to maintain the concept of social justice as well as gender justice in country, social justice, gender justice, if the constitution talks about free and fair judiciary, if it talks about free and fair electoral system, if it talks about neutral bureaucracy, if it talks about neutral or non-committed bureaucracy, etc., then you say, or you can say that the said constitution contains some values, some principles in it. If a constitution lacks all such principles, one can say that the said constitution has no values. Absence of these values or principles in a constitution, you can't imagine for the constitutionalism to exist. So all these principles, I mean all these values, all these principles, they simply constitute the constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is an abstract aspect. You cannot define it in its uniqueness. For defining it, you need to have a coverage of broader spectrum, and that broader spectrum would be constituted of all such ingredients. So, if a constitution provides the proper scope for all such principles to exist, you will say this constitution contains constitutionalism, and hence it can be referred to as a democratic constitution. Are you getting my point? See, suppose, as I told you here, if a constitution lacks the values or principles, again the values and principles are same. These are the values or principles. Means, if a constitution devoid of the concept of rule of law, the concept of freedom of speech and expression, the concept of social justice, you know social justice means in society there would be no discrimination amongst the people, even though they are standing on unequal footing of society. Means in the eyes of state, all the people are equal irrespective of their societal stature. Right? This is what? Social justice. Third, gender justice. There would be no discrimination amongst the males and females, men and women, boys and girls. Free and fair judiciary. Means judiciary should not work as being the shadow of executive or legislative. Judiciary must remain neutral. It must remain non-committed to government. If judiciary starts showing commitment towards the government, it is obvious that the legal system of the country would hamper. Free and fair electoral system. Without having free and fair electoral system, we cannot do justice with democracy. Neutral or non-committed bureaucracy means the system of which you are striving hard to be a part, that must remain non-committed one. Your political ideological affiliation should not be shown in your administrative decisions. You should not work as being the shadow of any political party or coalition of political parties. You always need to remain neutral in your administrative decision making. This is what required out of a value-based constitution. For example, suppose in country we have the government of National Democratic Alliance, of which the most prominent political party is BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party. The government is led by Mr. Prime Minister Narendra Modi. If all the administrative infrastructure, or you can say if the entire bureaucratic setup, they start making favor of the government, it means the neutrality would be lacking out of the bureaucracy, and that will simply hamper the constitutionalism which is given in our constitution. And once the constitutionalism would be hampered, we will be on the verge of transforming from democratic country to an undemocratic country. So, for making a country as a democratic one, it is obvious to make a proper balance amongst all these different principles of the constitution.